Hi, I thought I would tape a lesson from the lesson that was on Thursday, and I do believe that that was 3/9/2017. So that was Thursday, March 9th. This was what we discussed on Thursday, March 9th. We had three formulas that we were talking about. The first one was talking about the distance formula, and this formula actually will be on your formula sheet that you will be given for the EOC and for your test. So this formula you'll just need to know how to use, and it says to calculate the distance of D of a line segment with endpoints x1, y1 and x2, y2. Use the formula, the distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and take the square root of all of that. Now, the midpoint formula and the slope formula you actually will not be given, so this is a formula definitely that you need to have memorized. So the first formula, the midpoint formula, is you're given x1 and y1 and x2 and y2, and you use the formula to find your coordinate of your midpoint. So this would be your x coordinate of your midpoint, and this would be your y coordinate of your midpoint. And basically what I do is I add the two x's, divide by 2, add the two y's, divide by 2. So basically you're taking the average of the two x's, the average of the two y's. The next thing that we talked about was the slope, and we needed to change this to say x1, y1, that's my first point, and x2, y2 is my second point. And this is determined by the rise over the run, and you just do the change of the y's over the change of the x's. So then you use these formulas to figure out some of this. And I'm going to work number 4 out. We worked that in class, but I think if you missed instruction, number 4 is probably the most helpful of all of these. The first thing it asks you to do is find the slope. So I just write my slope formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to choose a point, and I can choose any point to be x1 and y1, and just choose the other point to be x2 and y2. Okay? And so m is equal to, 2 minus 6 over 3 minus negative 5. So I'm going to have negative 4 over, and this turns into 3 minus negative 5, and it's to be 3 plus 5 is 8. So my slope ends up being negative 1/2. Now the next thing it asks me to do is to find the midpoint. So what I do is I take the two x's and add them together. So I have negative 5 plus 3, and take that and divide by 2. That will be my new x. And my new y is 6 plus 2 divided by 2. And whenever I simplify all of that, it becomes negative 1, because negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. And then 4 is my y value of my midpoint. So I have a midpoint negative 1, positive 4, and you can always draw it in just to make sure that you have gotten it correctly, because it will appear to be in the middle of that line. And then the last thing I ask you to do is to find the distance. So I'm going to use the distance formula. And it says x2 minus x1, and I'm going to square that, plus y2 minus y1, and square that. So the distance is equal to 8 squared plus negative 4 squared. And notice I put it in parentheses because I know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So the distance is equal to 64 plus 16, and take the square root of that, and it is the square root of 80, and you can write that as a decimal. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on here. One other one that we may want to do is, let's look at number 2 back here. And it asks you to find the distance, the midpoint, and the slope of the segment through the points A and B. So again, I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2, and so the slope is just negative 6 minus 3, and negative 8 minus negative 8. So here it's negative 9 over 0. Well, you cannot divide a number by 0. So this is actually a vertical line because it has an undefined slope. I have a change of y, but I do not have a change of x. So this is an undefined slope, and so it's a vertical line. The next thing that I'm going to do is I need to find the midpoint. and I add my two x's, negative 8 plus negative 8 divided by 2, and I add my two y's, 3 plus negative 6 divided by 2, and so my midpoint becomes negative 8 and negative 3/2, it appears to be. So, and then I find the distance, and it's square root of negative 8 minus negative 8 squared plus negative 6 minus 3 squared, and this would give me 0 squared plus negative 9 squared, and so d is equal to the square root of 81, and so the distance, or the length of that line segment is 9. So hopefully that will help you with some of the problems when you're finding distance, midpoint, and slope.